In the heart of Prague, in the bitter winter of 1807, there existed a mirror unlike any other. It was said that this mirror did not merely reflect reality, but captured something far more sinister, the essence of those who gazed into it. Candlelight flickered across its surface, casting long shadows in the room, yet the mirror seemed to hold a light of its own, cold and penetrating. Those who stood before it often described a sensation of being watched, an unsettling weight pressing against the chest, as if invisible hands were attempting to pull them into the glass itself. The very air in the chamber seemed charged with an unnameable energy, thick with fear and expectation. The mirror story, shrouded in secrecy and classified by authorities, would eventually reach only fragments in letters, diaries, and whispers among the terrified citizens of Prague. It was not merely superstition that surrounded this object. The mirror had been linked to a series of bizarre and tragic events, strange disappearances, and sudden deaths. Servants would vanish without explanation, children would scream in terror for hours, and the wealthy owners of the mirror became increasingly withdrawn, obsessed with the reflective surface that seemed to respond to their presence. Some witnesses claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking inside the mirror, silhouettes moving independently from the world outside, performing acts that defied logic. The initial reports were dismissed as hysteria or exaggeration, yet the accumulation of incidents became too persistent to ignore. Even the most rational observers could not entirely explain the strange patterns of loss and fear that surrounded the mirror. From the first moment it arrived in Prague, the mirror commanded attention. Crafted by an unknown artisan, it possessed a depth and clarity that seemed unnatural. Unlike ordinary mirrors, which merely returned an image of the observer, this one appeared to have layers, almost as though one could see beyond the surface into a hidden dimension. Scholars and occultists alike were drawn to it, intrigued by its craftsmanship and the rumors of its unusual properties. Yet, fascination soon turned into dread as those who dared linger too long in front of it began reporting unexplainable phenomena, whispers in languages unknown, fleeting reflections of faces that were not their own, and a profound sense of being pulled toward the glass. The mirror, it seemed, demanded attention and exacted a price for curiosity. Word of the mirror spread quietly through the city, carried in hushed conversations in the narrow alleys of Prague. Rumors grew with each retelling, that the mirror was a conduit to another realm, a vessel capable of trapping the human soul, or perhaps a punishment from some dark and ancient force. Local authorities, concerned about public panic, quickly sought to suppress information, sealing reports and discouraging discussion. Yet even in the shadows, the stories persisted. Those who had encountered the mirror firsthand spoke of an overwhelming sense of inevitability, a creeping fear that could not be rationalized or dismissed. In this introduction, we are not merely recounting a tale of superstition. We are stepping into a historical case that intersects with human psychology, occult practices, and unexplained phenomena. The events surrounding this mirror reveal not only the fears of a city in the early 19th century but also the darker impulses of curiosity, obsession, and the human desire to understand that which defies comprehension. By the time we conclude this story, the mirror's legacy will become clear. It is not simply a reflection of what is visible, but a haunting reminder of what can vanish without a trace. The chilling reality is that the mirror's influence was not confined to legends or folklore. There were documented incidents, recorded by witnesses, that suggest a series of interactions far beyond ordinary explanation. Each report builds a pattern, a thread of terror that weaves through the fabric of Prague's history in 1807. This story invites us to question the boundaries between reality and the supernatural, between the mind's susceptibility to fear and the possibility of genuine phenomena that challenge our understanding. From the very first encounter, the mirror demanded a reckoning, and those who faced it were forever changed. By opening this case to exploration, we step into the shadowed corridors of history, where the line between truth and myth blurs. The mirror that swallowed souls is more than a tale of horror. It is a window into the fragility of human perception, the power of obsession, and the enduring fascination with objects that seem to hold secrets beyond our world. As we journey into this classified historical case, the story of the mirror begins not with answers, but with questions that continue to unsettle even centuries later. Prague in 1807 was a city perched between the echoes of medieval tradition and the stirrings of modernity, a place where cobblestone streets twisted like veins through dense neighborhoods, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke, wet stone, and occasional decay. Above ground, the city appeared orderly. Merchants traded in bustling squares, church bells tolled with measured regularity, and scholars in their cloisters debated philosophy and science. Yet beneath the surface, in narrow alleys and shadowed courtyards, Prague whispered secrets few dared to explore. Hidden within these streets were the relics of superstition and the residues of centuries-old fear, occult manuscripts, forgotten chapels, and whispered tales of the supernatural that lingered in the minds of its citizens. The city was a crossroads of culture and influence, shaped by its position under the Habsburg Empire. Its people were devoutly Catholic, yet folk beliefs and mystical traditions thrived alongside formal religion. Charms, talismans, and rituals were not uncommon in households, and many Praguers believed in spirits, curses, and enchanted objects. Among these beliefs, mirrors held a special significance. They were more than instruments of vanity. They were seen as potential gateways to other worlds, reflective surfaces that could reveal hidden truths or conceal unspeakable horrors. It was in this environment, where rationality and superstition coexisted uneasily, that the mirror arrived, unnoticed at first, yet poised to disrupt the fragile balance between belief and reality. Life in 1807 Prague was colored by uncertainty. Political unrest simmered in the background, and the city's past was riddled with stories of plague, fire, and unexplained disappearances. Such conditions made the populace particularly susceptible to fear and rumor. A single whispered story could ripple through a neighborhood, amplified by imagination and dread. The mirror, with its strange aura and unsettling incidents, quickly became a focal point for such anxieties. Its owners were prominent citizens, yet even their wealth and influence could not shield them from the mounting tension. Servants whispered behind closed doors, neighbors eyed the household with suspicion, and children refused to enter the rooms where the mirror was kept. Fear, subtle yet insidious, began to take root, and the mirror became the epicenter of unease that spread far beyond the walls of one house. Culturally, Prague was a city of intellectual curiosity as well as superstition. The libraries and academies contained texts on natural philosophy, early chemistry, and medicine, but alongside these scholarly pursuits were grimoires, alchemical treatises, and arcane diagrams whose meanings were known only to a few. Scholars debated the nature of the soul, the limits of human perception, and the possibility of objects containing or influencing spiritual essence. This intellectual backdrop provides a chilling context for the mirror. It was not merely an artifact of superstition, but a challenge to the understanding of science and philosophy of the time. Some educated observers suspected psychological explanations, while others feared genuine supernatural influence, and both perspectives heightened the sense of mystery that enveloped the mirror. The social fabric of Prague also played a role in amplifying the mirror's influence. Families were closely knit, and reputation was everything. Gossip could ruin a household, and fear of scandal often led people to conceal unusual events rather than confront them openly. This culture of secrecy allowed the legend of the mirror to grow unchecked, as incidents went unreported or were dismissed with polite skepticism in public, while private accounts of terror multiplied. Individuals who had encountered the mirror often felt a compulsion to speak in hushed tones, fearful that the wrong word might provoke the object's attention or bring misfortune upon themselves. The mirror's presence became both a psychological and social force, influencing behavior in ways that were subtle yet profound. The architecture and physical environment of Prague added to the city's dark allure. Narrow stairways, hidden passageways, and cellar spaces provided an ideal setting for objects of mysterious power. The mirror itself was housed in a manner that reflected this dichotomy, a grand facade visible to all, yet an interior labyrinth of shadowed rooms and hidden chambers where fear could take hold unobserved. In such spaces, imagination and reality blurred. Candlelight created dancing shadows that could be mistaken for moving figures, and the play of reflection amplified uncertainty. It was the perfect stage for an object that preyed on both curiosity and terror, a mirror that seemed to respond to human presence with an almost sentient awareness. By 1807, Prague was a city ready for a story like this, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary overlapped. The mirror's arrival did not merely disrupt a household, it tapped into the city's latent fears, social norms, and fascination with the unknown. Its legend would not stay confined to private walls. It would echo through the streets, whispered in marketplaces, recounted in alleys, and ultimately enter the annals of classified history. Understanding Prague in this era, its culture, its superstitions, and its shadows, is essential to grasping why a single object could wield such power and why its influence, real or imagined, would leave a mark that endured for centuries. In stepping into this world, we begin to see the mirror not as an isolated curiosity, but as a catalyst in a city already primed for fear and fascination. It was a time when science and superstition coexisted uneasily, when the boundaries between reason and terror were fragile, and when a reflective surface could hold the power to unsettle an entire community. The city of Prague, in all its complexity, became the perfect stage for a story that blurred the line between reality and nightmare, a story that we are only beginning to uncover in this historical case. The mirror appeared in Prague without fanfare, yet its arrival would mark the beginning of a cascade of events that defied explanation. Crafted by an unknown artisan, its origins were shrouded in mystery. Some whispered that it had travelled from Italy, others insisted it was the work of a forgotten alchemist from the Bohemian countryside. Its frame was carved with intricate symbols, the meaning of which seemed deliberately obscured. The glass itself possessed an unnatural clarity, almost unnerving in its perfection. Unlike ordinary mirrors that simply reflected the world, this one seemed to hold depth beyond comprehension, a shadowed space beneath the surface where light and darkness danced unnaturally. Those who first laid eyes upon it reported a sensation of vertigo, as though the mirror had the ability to draw them inward. The first owners were a prominent Prague family, wealthy and influential, their social standing making them both respected and envied. Initially, the mirror was displayed as an object of beauty, a centerpiece meant to showcase taste and refinement, but it did not remain merely decorative for long. Servants whispered of strange phenomena, reflections moving independently, fleeting figures that appeared behind the glass and vanished when observed directly, and cold drafts that emanated from its surface. Children, often more sensitive to unseen forces, refused to approach it. The family initially dismissed these occurrences as tricks of the mind, the result of poor lighting or overactive imagination. Yet as days passed, incidents multiplied, each one more disturbing than the last. The mirror quickly became an object of obsession. The family members found themselves drawn to it repeatedly, unable to resist its allure despite an increasing sense of dread. One servant recorded in a hidden journal how the youngest daughter of the household would spend hours staring into the mirror, speaking softly to unseen figures and recoiling in terror without explanation. Guests reported an uncomfortable sensation when entering the room, a shiver that had nothing to do with the winter chill. Even scholars invited to inspect the mirror noted an odd quality. When viewed in candlelight, the glass seemed to shimmer with a depth that ordinary mirrors could not achieve. Some speculated that it contained traces of mercury, others suggested alchemical treatments, but no explanation could account for the growing unease it provoked. Early incidents surrounding the mirror were subtle but troubling. Objects placed before it would later be found moved or broken. Shadows seemed to linger unnaturally, and reflections of people sometimes appeared distorted, as if their image had been stretched or obscured. A maid described seeing a shadow detach from her own reflection, an event that left her screaming in terror and refusing to enter the room again. Such experiences, dismissed by some as hysteria, were increasingly corroborated by multiple witnesses, lending an air of legitimacy to the growing reputation of the mirror as something more than mere glass and frame. Despite these ominous signs, fascination with the mirror only deepened. The family consulted scholars, occultists, and even local priests, hoping to understand the object's influence. Some warned that it might be cursed, a vessel for malevolent spirits. Others suggested it was a tool of alchemy, a way to manipulate unseen forces. The mirror, in a way, seemed to respond to attention, rewarding curiosity with fleeting glimpses of strange phenomena while punishing skepticism with unease and fear. This duality, the blend of beauty and terror, made the mirror irresistible. Those who gazed too long found themselves trapped between fascination and fear, drawn inexorably into its presence. Whispers of the mirror began to spread beyond the household. Neighbors reported hearing cries in the night, seeing flickering candlelight in empty rooms, or glimpsing figures moving behind curtained windows. The city, already steeped in superstition and fear of the supernatural, began to murmur about the object that swallowed souls. While the family attempted to keep the mirror private, the tales could not be contained. Travelers passing through Prague carried stories of the house with the strange mirror, and the legend began to entwine with local folklore. In this way, an ordinary household object became an instrument of terror, its influence extending beyond the walls in which it was kept. By this time, it was clear that the mirror was no ordinary object. Its presence caused fear, obsession, and inexplicable phenomena, and yet it retained a strange allure. Scholars documented its odd properties, servants fled in terror, and family members oscillated between fascination and dread. The mirror had established itself as the center of a growing pattern of disruption, a focus for human curiosity and fear alike. Its arrival marked the beginning of a saga that would encompass disappearances, madness, and, eventually, intervention by authorities. In retrospect, the mirror's arrival in Prague was not merely an isolated incident but the ignition of a series of events that reflected the tensions of the era, the coexistence of science and superstition, the fragility of human perception, and the allure of the unknown. It became a test of courage and sanity, drawing the city's most curious and its most fearful into its orbit. The mirror, with its unknown origins and unnerving properties, was no longer a passive object of art. It was a catalyst, an agent of change whose influence would be felt across the household and, eventually, across the city itself. The stage was set. The mirror, with its unnatural clarity and mysterious craftsmanship, had arrived in a world ready to fear it. What began as fascination would soon turn to terror, as the object's influence began to manifest in ways that no one could have predicted. And in the flickering candlelight of that Prague manor, the first whispers of the mirror's dark reputation took root, a reputation that would only grow darker with time. It was only weeks after the mirror arrived in the Prague manor that the first signs of its true power became apparent. The household staff, who had initially treated the object as a curiosity, began to whisper among themselves about strange occurrences that defied reason. Small objects would vanish from the room where the mirror stood, only to reappear in locations no one could have accessed. Servants reported hearing faint murmurs that seemed to emanate directly from the glass, voices speaking in tongues unknown, repeating words that made no sense yet evoked a profound sense of dread. At night, the mirror's surface appeared to ripple, as if alive, reflecting not the room around it but dark shapes and shifting figures that vanished when approached. The first human victim of the mirror's influence was a young maid named Clara, known for her cheerful disposition and meticulous work. She was discovered one morning in the mirror room, staring silently at her reflection, pale and trembling, her hands pressed against the glass. When questioned, she could offer no explanation for her hours of fixation. She only muttered about faces behind faces and someone calling me from within. Within days, her health deteriorated rapidly. She refused to eat, became withdrawn, and muttered constantly about being trapped. Despite the family's efforts and consultations with local physicians, Clara died under mysterious circumstances, her body found cold and rigid, eyes wide open as though staring into an unseen horror. The official cause was listed vaguely as illness, but those close to the household whispered of the mirror's dark influence. Following Clara's death, a pattern began to emerge. Children in the household, naturally more sensitive to the unknown, exhibited signs of extreme distress. The youngest daughter would scream in terror if forced to enter the mirror room, claiming that someone is trying to pull me in. Nannies and tutors reported shadowy figures appearing in the glass, moving independently of any reflection in the room. The family attempted to rationalize these events, attributing them to imagination or hysteria, but as incidents mounted, even the most rational observers could no longer ignore the evidence. The mirror seemed to have an agency of its own, responding to curiosity with fascination and to fear with punishment. Neighbors also began noticing the effects. On more than one occasion, passers-by glimpsed movement in the windows of the manor when no one was present, or heard faint cries echoing through the halls late at night. One particularly chilling account came from a local baker who claimed to see a figure step backward into the mirror, then vanish entirely. His testimony was dismissed at the time as the fanciful tale of an over-imaginative man, yet it mirrored the experiences of those inside the house. The repetition of such incidents began to build a compelling, if terrifying, narrative. The mirror was not inert, and it appeared to exact a terrible toll on those who approached it. As fear spread, the family attempted to limit access to the mirror. Yet even restricted interaction did not prevent the tragedies. Servants who delivered meals to the mirror room reported sudden dizziness, nausea, and a sensation of being watched. In some cases, objects carried into the room would inexplicably shatter, as though rejected by an unseen force. The psychological pressure created by these events was immense. Anxiety, paranoia, and despair became constant companions in the household. Some observers began to speak quietly of madness, suggesting that the mirror was not merely a reflective surface but a catalyst for insanity. Medical intervention of the time was limited, yet physicians called to examine the victims noted unusual symptoms: pallor, trembling, extreme fatigue, and, in some cases, speechlessness or incoherent muttering. While some doctors attributed the symptoms to hysteria or nervous disorders, others expressed unease, recording observations of phenomena they could not explain. Letters from scholars and local authorities hinted at the growing concern. Here was a case that defied understanding, a mirror that seemed capable of influencing both mind and body in profound, disturbing ways. The combination of disappearances, madness, and physical decline led to whispered accusations of curses or dark magic. Some feared the mirror itself harbored a malevolent spirit. Others suspected the handiwork of secretive alchemists who had imbued the object with occult power. In either scenario, the mirror became not just a household object but a source of pervasive terror. Its influence extended beyond mere reflection. It seemed to reach into the very essence of those who encountered it, twisting perception, distorting reality, and ultimately consuming vitality. By the end of the first month, the household was irrevocably altered. Fear replaced curiosity, vigilance replaced routine, and the mirror's presence loomed over every action. Visitors were scarce, servants hesitant, and family members themselves found their nights restless, haunted by images that emerged from the mirror in dreams. Even those who had not directly encountered the object reported a growing sense of dread when discussing it, as though the mirror's influence could extend through conversation, insinuating itself into the minds of all who heard its story. The first victims were only the beginning. Each disappearance and each descent into madness served as a grim warning. The mirror's reach was not passive. It demanded attention, it provoked obsession, and it punished those who underestimated its power. The pattern was unmistakable. Anyone who approached it risked being drawn into a web of fear and fatality, a chilling testament to the mirror's growing control over the household. In these early days, the line between superstition and reality blurred, leaving only the undeniable truth. The mirror was an object that could no longer be ignored, its influence spreading silently but relentlessly through the lives of those who encountered it. It was this combination of tragedy and terror that would ultimately draw the attention of scholars, investigators, and city authorities. The mirror's deadly influence could no longer remain a private matter. It had begun to shape the destiny of those around it in ways that demanded scrutiny. In these first incidents, the seeds of legend were planted, a dark narrative that would grow into a tale of obsession, horror, and the unexplained, leaving an indelible mark on Prague's history. As the tragedies surrounding the mirror escalated, it became clear that mere fear and superstition could no longer contain the situation. The family, desperate for answers, called upon a combination of physicians, scholars, and even local occultists, individuals who represented both the rational and the mystical. The intent was to uncover the truth. Was the mirror truly a supernatural menace, or was it simply a trigger for hysteria and imagination? What followed was a collision of science, superstition, and human curiosity, a tense struggle to make sense of events that defied conventional understanding. The first investigators were physicians trained in the early sciences of neurology and mental health. They approached the case with clinical detachment, documenting symptoms in meticulous detail. Victims exhibited extreme anxiety, pallor, tremors, incoherence, and in some cases, sudden fainting or collapse. Physicians theorized that the mirror might provoke intense psychological stress, particularly in a household already steeped in fear and rumor. They considered nervous disorders, mass hysteria, and psychosomatic illness, recording each observation with growing unease. Yet despite these efforts, the physicians could not account for several phenomena: shadows moving independently, voices emanating from the mirror, and the sudden disappearance of individuals under circumstances that defied logic. Parallel to the medical inquiry, scholars and occultists examined the mirror itself. They scrutinized the glass and frame, searching for alchemical residues, hidden mechanisms, or signs of enchantment. Some drew upon historical texts, recalling legends of mirrors capable of trapping spirits or reflecting hidden realms. Others referenced ancient rituals that suggested certain objects could act as vessels for souls. These investigations, though esoteric, were treated with a measure of seriousness in Prague, a city where intellectual curiosity often coexisted uneasily with belief in the supernatural. Even rational scholars, initially skeptical, began to admit that the mirror's properties challenged both science and reason. One particularly striking aspect of the investigation was the mirror's responsiveness. Observers reported that it seemed to react differently depending on the mindset of the viewer. Those who approached with skepticism sometimes felt a sudden chill, a sense of eyes watching from within the glass. Those who approached with fear often experienced hallucinations or auditory phenomena. This led investigators to consider whether the mirror functioned as a catalyst for psychological projection, amplifying the deepest fears and obsessions of those who faced it. Yet the consistency of certain patterns, disappearances, shadowy reflections, and physical decline resisted purely rational explanation, suggesting the mirror's influence extended beyond the mind. The investigative process was slow and fraught with challenges. Witnesses were often terrified to speak openly, fearing that recounting events might provoke the mirror further. The family itself vacillated between cooperation and secrecy, protective of their reputation yet desperate for answers. Letters and reports circulated among scholars, detailing the peculiarities of the mirror in ways that combined observation, speculation, and fear. In some instances, investigators themselves reported unsettling experiences, fleeting images, whispers, and sensations of being watched. These accounts were treated cautiously, yet they added weight to the notion that the mirror's effects were not entirely imagined. The tension between empirical science and superstition defined this period of investigation. Physicians sought measurable symptoms, chemical or physical anomalies, and documented evidence. Occultists and folklorists looked for signs of curses, rituals, or spiritual interference. Both sides occasionally clashed, yet both were confronted with phenomena that challenged their worldview. The mirror became a test of the limits of understanding, revealing the fragility of human perception when faced with the unknown. It was a convergence of the rational and the mystical, a scenario in which neither could fully explain the events, yet both could observe the undeniable influence of the object. As the investigations continued, the mirror's reputation spread beyond the household. City authorities became aware of the potential dangers, and whispers of the mirror that swallows souls reached the ears of Habsburg officials. The combination of psychological disturbance, mysterious disappearances, and public fear created an urgent need for containment. Investigators recommended restricted access, careful documentation, and even attempts to physically isolate the mirror. Yet despite these measures, the mirror's presence continued to dominate the household and its surroundings, as if its influence could not be contained by walls or precaution. The intersection of science and superstition revealed another crucial factor: human perception. The mirror did not merely reflect, it elicited, provoked, and amplified the fears and obsessions of those who approached it. Investigators began to understand that the horror was not limited to physical phenomena. It was psychological, social, and deeply personal. Each observer brought their own anxieties, traumas, and beliefs into the encounter, which the mirror seemed to exploit with uncanny precision. This realization added a chilling dimension. Even those trained in rational inquiry were vulnerable, their skepticism insufficient to shield them from the object's influence. By the end of this phase, it became clear that the mirror was more than a curiosity or household decoration. It was a subject of serious investigation, straddling the realms of science, folklore, and human psychology. Physicians, scholars, and occultists alike were confronted with phenomena that resisted categorization, creating a climate of uncertainty and fear. The mirror had transcended its material form, becoming a locus of dread, fascination, and obsession, a force that challenged the boundaries of knowledge and the courage of those who dared confront it. In this confluence of investigation, fear, and fascination, we witnessed the early recognition of the mirror's true nature. It was not merely an object to be studied, but a presence to be experienced, one that could alter perception, influence behavior, and leave indelible marks on both mind and body. It demanded attention, and in doing so, it ensured that no rational explanation could fully diminish its power. The mirror had become a force of its own, compelling scholars and skeptics alike to acknowledge the possibility that some mysteries defy understanding, and some objects hold darkness far beyond the reach of reason. As the mirror's influence grew, so too did the number of witnesses willing, or compelled, to recount their experiences. Diaries, letters, and whispered accounts began to accumulate, each telling a story more chilling than the last. These testimonies painted a picture of a household and, eventually, a city gripped by fear, a fear that was both tangible and psychological. Each voice, whether servant, family member, or neighbor, contributed to the mounting evidence that the mirror was no ordinary object, and that something within it seemed to defy logic, perception, and even the natural order of life and death. One of the earliest accounts came from a maid who worked in the manor's upper chambers. Her diary described the first nights after the mirror's arrival, when she noticed faint ripples in its surface as if it were breathing. She wrote of hearing faint whispers that seemed to echo the thoughts of the household's occupants, murmurs that could not be traced to any source. Sometimes the voices were unintelligible, syllables that had no meaning yet evoked deep dread. On other occasions, the whispers repeated private fears and anxieties, exposing secrets the witness had shared with no one. The maid's testimony emphasized a sense of invasion, a feeling that the mirror was aware of her, observing and recording her very essence. Another account came from a neighboring scholar, who had been called to inspect the mirror at the family's request. He reported an uncanny phenomenon. When he looked into the glass, he saw not only his reflection but fleeting images of people he did not know, engaged in strange activities or suffering in ways he could scarcely describe. Shadows moved independently, sometimes reaching toward him as if trying to escape the mirror's depths. He noted in his letter that even after leaving the room, he could feel the sensation of being watched, as if the mirror's presence had extended beyond the confines of its frame. The youngest children of the household also contributed to the tapestry of testimony, their fear raw and unfiltered. They spoke of seeing figures that were not present, of faces pressed against the glass that did not belong to anyone alive, and of whispers calling their names in the dead of night. These accounts, often dismissed by adults as fanciful imaginings, gained credence as multiple witnesses reported similar experiences. The consistency of these reports, across ages, genders, and social status, lent an eerie authenticity to the stories, suggesting that the mirror's effects were not limited to individual imagination but may have been objectively influencing perception. Servants provided another layer of testimony, often more harrowing than the accounts of scholars or children. One footman wrote in a hidden journal that he saw a colleague step backward into the mirror and vanish entirely. No trace of the man was ever found, and the incident left the household in panic. Another servant described waking to find herself standing before the mirror, unable to move, with the sensation of an invisible force pressing her toward the glass. These first-hand accounts conveyed a profound sense of helplessness, as though the mirror had the ability to dominate not only the senses but the will itself. Neighbors, too, reported strange experiences. Some claimed to hear cries emanating from the manor's windows in the dead of night. Others recounted seeing flickering lights, distorted reflections, or the sudden disappearance of people glimpsed in passing. Even those who never directly encountered the mirror described an oppressive atmosphere surrounding the house, a palpable dread that seemed to radiate from within. Letters between citizens hint at the ripple effect of the mirror's presence, spreading fear across the neighborhood, fostering superstition, and embedding the story of its malevolence into local consciousness. Analysis of these testimonies reveals certain recurring patterns: a sense of being watched, auditory phenomena, shadowy figures, sudden disappearances, and psychological distress. Whether viewed through the lens of superstition or early psychology, these consistencies suggest that the mirror had a profound impact on human perception. Some investigators of the time proposed that the mirror acted as a conduit, amplifying the subconscious fears and anxieties of those who encountered it. Others speculated that its influence was more sinister, an external force capable of altering reality itself. Regardless of the interpretation, the accumulation of first-hand accounts created a compelling narrative that could not be easily dismissed. The historical documents also provide hints of the mirror's reach beyond the household. Letters and reports to city authorities indicate that the object's reputation was becoming a matter of public concern. Scholars debated the nature of the phenomena, physicians speculated on psychosomatic causes, priests considered spiritual interference. The testimonies bridged these worlds, offering evidence that was at once personal, social, and inexplicable. The voices from the past, when pieced together, form a chilling mosaic, one of curiosity, obsession, fear, and suffering, all centered around a single object that seemed to command both attention and terror. By examining these reports and testimonies, it becomes evident that the mirror's legend is rooted not merely in hearsay, but in the lived experiences of multiple witnesses. Each account reinforces the others, creating a cumulative impression of an object that was far more than reflective glass. The stories evoke a sense of agency in the mirror, suggesting that it could observe, react, and perhaps even manipulate those who came into contact with it. These voices from the past form the backbone of the historical case, lending it credibility, depth, and a chilling resonance that continues to fascinate modern researchers and storytellers alike. The mirror, through these testimonies, becomes more than an artifact. It becomes a presence, a character in its own story, capable of inspiring fear, obsession, and horror. It is through the eyes, ears, and experiences of those who encountered it that we begin to understand its power, and the terrifying reality that it may have been more than anyone could comprehend. As the mirror's influence spread, the disturbances no longer remained confined to a single household. Reports of unexplained phenomena, disappearances, shadowy figures, and psychological terror began reaching Prague city authorities. Initially dismissed as rumor or hysteria, the increasing frequency and consistency of accounts could not be ignored. By late 1807, the case had escalated to the attention of higher officials, including representatives of the Habsburg administration, who viewed the situation with both concern and apprehension. The combination of public fear, unexplained deaths, and potential scandal demanded action, yet it was a delicate matter. Mishandling could spark widespread panic in a city already attuned to superstition and rumor. The government's initial approach was cautious. Investigators were discreetly dispatched to the household, instructed to observe and document without drawing undue attention. These officials encountered the same unsettling phenomena as the family and earlier scholars: shadows moving independently in the mirror, whispers echoing within rooms, and inexplicable disappearances. They were also confronted with the testimonies of servants, scholars, and neighbors, which reinforced the perception that the mirror was far more than an ordinary household object. Reports described a palpable aura of fear surrounding the manor, an almost tangible presence that could affect anyone entering the building. Concerned with both public order and the preservation of authority, officials classified the case, sealing files and restricting access to the documentation. Records were marked as sensitive or confidential, and the matter was discussed only in private channels. The fear was twofold. First, that the mirror's reported effects might incite panic among the general populace. Second, that the mysterious nature of the object could invite unwanted attention from occultists, charlatans, or those with malicious intent. By controlling information, the government sought to contain not only the mirror but also the narrative surrounding it, effectively erasing its more sensational aspects from public knowledge. Within these classified files, investigators recorded extraordinary details. One report mentioned the disappearance of a servant, observed entering the mirror room but never leaving. Another described a scholar's encounter in which shadows detached from the mirror and lingered in the room, eliciting profound terror. Physicians noted the rapid psychological decline of individuals who approached the mirror, with symptoms that defied conventional medical understanding. The files, heavily redacted in later years, hinted at methods used to isolate the mirror, discussions of potential destruction, and concerns about the object's possible sentience. In addition to documenting phenomena, the government took steps to physically secure the mirror. It was moved to a guarded chamber within the manor, restricted to limited personnel under strict supervision. Access was monitored, and any interaction was meticulously recorded. Yet even these precautions could not entirely contain the mirror's influence. Accounts from guards and officials described fleeting shadows, cold drafts, and auditory phenomena, whispers that seemed to emanate from within the glass. The mirror, it seemed, was not easily constrained by walls or rules. Its reach extended beyond the measures imposed upon it. The political context of Prague at the time added another layer of complexity. The Habsburg Empire, concerned with maintaining public order and avoiding scandals that could undermine authority, viewed the mirror case through the lens of state stability. Reports of supernatural activity or mysterious deaths had the potential to stir unrest or fuel conspiracies. The decision to classify the case was as much about controlling perception as it was about investigating reality. By restricting information, the administration ensured that the mirror's legend would remain hidden from public scrutiny, preserved only in private archives accessible to select officials and scholars. Despite these precautions, rumors persisted. Citizens whispered about the house where souls disappeared, and speculated about dark rituals or cursed objects. Travelers passing through Prague sometimes carried fragments of these stories to neighboring towns. The tension between secrecy and rumor created a paradox. The government sought to suppress knowledge, yet human fascination ensured that fragments of the tale persisted, growing with each retelling. The mirror's legend, though classified, was quietly embedding itself into the collective consciousness of the city. The classified files also revealed early attempts at intervention. Officials debated whether the mirror should be destroyed, concealed, or studied further. Some recommended destroying it immediately, citing the risk to public safety. Others argued for containment and observation, hoping to glean knowledge from an object whose properties were unknown. These discussions, heavily censored in later archives, suggest an awareness of both the mirror's potential danger and its extraordinary nature. The object was no longer simply an artifact. It had become a subject of state-level concern, a phenomenon straddling the boundaries of science, superstition, and the unexplained. By the time the government fully intervened, the mirror had already claimed several victims and left a trail of psychological devastation. Its presence challenged rational inquiry, tested the limits of observation, and provoked fear in those tasked with studying it. The classified files, preserved but largely inaccessible, serve as a chilling testament to the lengths authorities went to contain what they could neither explain nor control. The mirror had transcended its material form, becoming both a historical anomaly and a symbol of the unknown forces that lurk just beyond the reach of comprehension. Through these interventions, we see the mirror not merely as a haunted object, but as a phenomenon that elicited the full attention of rational authority while remaining resistant to it. The tension between secrecy and observation, fear and curiosity, highlights the unique nature of this historical case. It was no longer just a household tragedy, it had become a classified enigma, a mirror whose story was carefully guarded, yet whose influence remained undeniable. The stage was set for further exploration, as scholars, witnesses, and authorities continued to grapple with an object that seemed to defy both understanding and containment. Following the government's intervention, the mirror was subjected to a series of containment measures, each more desperate than the last. Officials, scholars, and priests collaborated to limit access to the object while attempting to uncover its secrets. The first step was isolation. The mirror was moved to a specially prepared chamber within the manor, a room reinforced with heavy drapes, wooden barriers, and locks designed to restrict entry. Only a handful of trusted servants and scholars were permitted inside, each under strict supervision, yet even these precautions could not entirely sever the mirror's reach. Shadows reportedly continued to flit across the glass, and those who entered the room often returned pale, trembling, and unwilling to discuss what they had witnessed. The city's most respected occultists were consulted to perform rituals designed to contain or neutralize the mirror's influence. Some attempted purification rites with holy water, incense, and consecrated symbols, reciting prayers and invocations intended to repel malevolent spirits. Others turned to more arcane practices, drawing upon ancient grimoires that described methods for trapping souls or suppressing cursed objects. One ritual involved surrounding the mirror with a circle of iron filings and inscribing cryptic symbols on the frame, in the hope that such measures would bind whatever force resided within. Accounts of these rituals, preserved in letters and diaries, describe intense psychological strain on the participants, who often reported visions, whispers, and overwhelming fear during the ceremonies. Despite these efforts, the mirror continued to assert its presence. Witnesses claimed that during certain rituals, the glass would ripple violently, reflecting not the room but shifting scenes that appeared alive. Some described figures reaching from the mirror, their hands pressing against the glass as if trying to escape confinement. In several accounts, participants reported faint voices pleading or laughing, echoing the rhythms of speech but carrying an uncanny, otherworldly resonance. The rituals, intended to contain the mirror, seemed only to provoke a more intense manifestation of its properties. Isolation alone proved insufficient. Scholars suggested additional measures, including covering the mirror entirely and limiting visual access. Heavy drapes were drawn across the glass, and a secure frame was constructed to prevent anyone from approaching too closely. Yet even in darkness, the mirror's influence reportedly persisted. Servants assigned to monitor the room described cold drafts, faint glimmers within the drapery, and an oppressive feeling of being watched. Psychological strain became a recurring theme. Those responsible for overseeing the mirror's containment often fell ill or reported extreme anxiety, suggesting that proximity alone could transfer some aspect of its power. The mirror also began to inspire obsession among those permitted to study it. Scholars and occultists, driven by curiosity, spent hours documenting every observed phenomenon, sketching the frame's intricate symbols, and attempting to decode patterns in the reflections. One physician's notes reveal sleepless nights, trembling hands, and a growing fixation on the mirror surface. Even as containment measures were enforced, the mirror seemed to attract the minds of the curious, drawing them into its orbit of fascination and terror. Obsession became a double-edged sword. The more one sought understanding, the more one risked mental deterioration or worse. Several tragic incidents occurred during this period. A young apprentice tasked with assisting in the rituals reportedly vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a faint echo of whispered pleas recorded by the supervising priest. Another scholar, after prolonged observation, was found unconscious before the mirror, murmuring in a language unknown, with no recollection of how he had arrived there. These incidents reinforced the belief that the mirror was not inert, but a force capable of interacting with human perception, psychology, and perhaps even the soul itself. The containment efforts, while meticulous, highlighted a central dilemma. The mirror could not be destroyed, nor could it be fully understood or controlled. Every attempt to suppress it seemed to provoke further manifestations. The room in which it was confined became a locus of dread, a place where fear, obsession, and unexplained phenomena converged. Even those not directly involved in the rituals felt the weight of its presence, hearing rumors of shadows, voices, and vanishings that amplified anxiety throughout the household. The mirror, it seemed, transcended its physical form, asserting an influence that could not be restrained by conventional means. By the end of 1807, the mirror had established itself as both a physical and psychological presence. Containment had slowed but not eliminated its impact. The combination of isolation, ritual, and obsessive study revealed that the object was far more complex than any contemporary understanding could fully explain. Authorities recognized that the mirror was not simply a reflective surface. It was a focal point for fear, obsession, and potentially something beyond human comprehension. The measures taken to contain it illustrate both the ingenuity and the limitations of 19th century science and superstition, showing a desperate attempt to confront a phenomenon that straddled the boundary between reality and the unknown. In examining this period, we see how the mirror's influence was compounded by human psychology, cultural beliefs, and institutional intervention. It was a test of mental fortitude, a challenge to rational inquiry, and a confrontation with forces that could not be quantified or categorized. The combination of rituals, isolation, and obsession created a charged atmosphere in which the mirror became both feared and studied, a paradoxical object of terror and fascination. These attempts at containment underscore the mirror's power and the lengths to which humans will go to confront, or survive, the inexplicable. The mirror's story during this time serves as a chilling reminder. Some objects, once imbued with mystery, cannot be restrained by walls, locks, or ritual alone. Its presence persisted, a silent yet palpable force that shaped the lives, minds, and fates of those who dared to engage with it. The chamber where it was contained became a symbol of the struggle between understanding and fear, a stage upon which the mirror continued to assert its dark influence, impervious to human intervention. Even as attempts at containment continued, the mirror's influence extended far beyond the manor's walls. By this stage, the story of the mirror that swallowed souls had begun to seep into Prague's collective consciousness, a mixture of rumor, observation, and terror. Its presence was felt not just in the manor, but in the shadows of the city itself, in whispered warnings between neighbors, and in the tremors of curiosity and fear that traveled from street to street. The mirror had become more than an object. It was a legend, a living symbol of the unknown and the perilous lure of obsession. The mirror's legacy was most evident in the psychological impact it left on those who had come into contact with it. Survivors of its early influence spoke of lingering terror, nightmares, and visions that haunted them long after leaving the manor. One former servant described seeing fleeting reflections of the mirror's shadowy figures in ordinary surfaces, windows, puddles, even the polished floors of her new workplace. Scholars who had observed the mirror documented obsessive thoughts, sleep disturbances, and recurring images that seemed to have been imprinted on the mind. In many cases, fear became a permanent companion, a reminder of an encounter that had blurred the boundaries between reality and nightmare. The legend of the mirror also inspired a wealth of rumors and myth-making. Stories of souls being trapped, shadowy figures escaping into the city, and whispers of curses circulated widely, each retelling amplifying the horror. Parents warned children not to look too long into reflective surfaces, claiming that the mirror's influence could spread invisibly, a lesson in caution embedded in folklore. Local writers and diarists recorded the mirror's tale in both factual and embellished accounts, blending observation with imagination. The line between historical record and myth became increasingly blurred, and yet the pattern of terror remained consistent. The mirror exerted power through fear, shaping behavior and perception even among those who had never seen it directly. Obsession was another key aspect of the mirror's enduring influence. Scholars, occultists, and officials who studied the object often found themselves unable to disengage. One physician's notes describe hours of solitary observation that devolved into an unhealthy fixation, accompanied by insomnia and hallucinations. Another account details a scholar spending weeks attempting to map the mirror's frame and symbols, recording subtle shifts in reflections, until he became physically ill and mentally unstable. The object seemed to demand attention, and in return, exacted a toll. The more one tried to understand it, the more one became entangled in its psychological and perhaps supernatural influence. Even decades later, the mirror's legacy persisted in the city's archives and the memories of its witnesses. Letters from officials and scholars, preserved but heavily redacted, reveal an ongoing concern about the potential dangers of the mirror. Discussions of whether to destroy, hide, or continue studying it highlight the enduring tension between curiosity and safety. Some believed the mirror could never be neutralized, that its very nature made it an object of obsession and fear beyond human control. Others maintained that careful study might yield understanding, though the risks were clearly documented. In this way, the mirror story became a cautionary tale, a lesson in the dangers of human fascination with objects that elude comprehension. The mirror's myth extended beyond Prague. Traveling merchants, scholars, and clergy carried fragments of the story to other regions, and tales of mirrors that trap souls began to appear in distant towns. While many of these accounts were undoubtedly embellished, They often reflected elements consistent with the original events: shadows, whispers, psychological distress, and the inexplicable disappearance of individuals. The mirror had achieved a form of immortality through storytelling, its legend growing as it spread, reinforcing the terrifying possibility that some objects possess power far beyond what the human mind can rationalize. The enduring fear and fascination surrounding the mirror also reveal a deeper truth about human nature. The object became a canvas for projection, a mirror not only of faces but of desires, fears, and obsessions. Its influence extended beyond the material into the psychological and social realms, demonstrating how a single artifact could shape perception, manipulate attention, and induce obsession. In essence, the mirror's legacy was not confined to physical phenomena. It was a profound study in human vulnerability, the seductive pull of curiosity, and the consequences of confronting what cannot be fully understood. By the close of the mirror's active period in Prague, the city itself had absorbed its shadow. Families altered behavior, scholars debated its nature for years, and the few who had witnessed its full power carried an indelible imprint of fear and awe. The mirror was both a historical artifact and a psychological study, a cautionary symbol of the dangers of fascination with the unknown. Its story reminds us that some mysteries, once encountered, cannot be forgotten. They persist, lingering in memory, legend, and human imagination. In the end, the mirror's legacy is a complex intertwining of fear, myth, and obsession. It is a case study in how an object can extend influence beyond the physical, shaping not only the lives of those who encounter it but the collective consciousness of a community. The story of the mirror that swallowed souls is a tale of curiosity turned to horror, of obsession that erodes reason, and of fear that leaves a lasting mark. Its presence in Prague in 1807, though now classified and largely obscured in historical records, continues to intrigue, frighten, and challenge our understanding of what objects can truly hold: the power to captivate, to manipulate, and perhaps even to consume the very essence of those who dare to gaze too long. Centuries after the mirror's infamous presence in Prague, historians, psychologists, and paranormal researchers have revisited the case, attempting to reconcile centuries-old accounts with modern understanding. The object, long shrouded in classified files and anecdotal testimonies, has become a subject of speculative inquiry, challenging conventional explanations and reigniting fascination with the events of 1807. Modern analysis approaches the mirror through multiple lenses: historical documentation, psychological interpretation, and even scientific inquiry into phenomena that defy easy classification. From a historical perspective, the mirror's documentation offers a unique glimpse into early 19th century Prague, revealing how superstition, authority, and human psychology intersected. Letters from scholars, priests, and city officials describe events with remarkable consistency: disappearances, obsessive behavior, hallucinations, and auditory phenomena. These sources, although sometimes fragmented, suggest that the mirror's influence was real enough to provoke official action, including classified containment measures and state intervention. Even without invoking the supernatural, the patterns of obsession, fear, and psychological distress point to a remarkable social and psychological phenomenon. Psychologists analyzing the case today consider the mirror as an extreme example of environmental and suggestive influence. Historical witnesses reported being drawn to the object, their attention and fear amplified by social reinforcement and cultural belief in the supernatural. Mass hysteria, sleep deprivation, and obsessive focus could easily have produced hallucinations, auditory phenomena, and distorted perception of reality. In the case of the young maid Clara or the scholars who later fell ill, prolonged exposure to fear and obsession may have caused psychosomatic decline, acute anxiety, and even fatal consequences. Modern psychological frameworks, such as stress-induced psychosis or shared delusions, provide plausible explanations for some of the more disturbing accounts. Yet scientific analysis alone struggles to account for the mirror's more inexplicable features. Witnesses consistently described shadows moving independently, figures emerging from the glass, and voices calling to them from within its depths. Even in modern replications of optical phenomena and mirrors, these effects cannot be fully reproduced, particularly when combined with reports of psychological and physical deterioration. Some researchers speculate that unique environmental factors, such as lighting, reflections, and the social context of fear, may have created a feedback loop, amplifying human perception into experiences that seemed genuinely supernatural. Others propose that the mirror's frame, engraved with unknown symbols, could have played a psychological role, a focus for both belief and expectation that intensified the perception of influence. Paranormal researchers have taken the story further, suggesting that the mirror may have possessed properties beyond the physical. Some propose that it acted as a conduit, a vessel for residual energy or consciousness, capable of influencing observers and even trapping fragments of identity. This hypothesis aligns with folklore traditions of soul mirrors, artifacts believed to capture or manipulate the essence of those who gazed into them. While these theories remain speculative, they underscore the mirror's enduring capacity to inspire both fear and curiosity, illustrating a phenomenon that resists simple categorization within science or history. The mirror's legend has also informed modern understanding of obsession and perception. Scholars note a pattern of human behavior that recurs across cultures and eras. Objects imbued with mystery can provoke fascination, fear, and extreme fixation. The Prague mirror serves as an early documented example of this phenomenon, demonstrating how cultural context, human psychology, and environmental factors converge to create experiences that feel profoundly real, even when the mechanisms remain mysterious. Its story functions as a cautionary tale, reminding modern audiences that curiosity, while a driving force for discovery, can also become a pathway to psychological and emotional peril. Technology has allowed further exploration of the legend, albeit indirectly. Historical reenactments, psychological simulations, and the study of optical and acoustic properties of mirrors have provided insights into how such an object could produce distressing effects. Researchers studying mirror-induced hallucinations note that prolonged exposure can cause visual distortions, sensations of movement, and auditory misperceptions, all phenomena reported in historical accounts. Combined with social reinforcement and the expectation of supernatural activity, these effects offer a compelling framework for understanding the mirror's influence without fully invoking the supernatural. Yet the question remains unresolved. Was the mirror purely a psychological catalyst, or did it harbor something genuinely inexplicable? Classified documents hint at the possibility that the authorities themselves believed the mirror's effects went beyond simple human perception. Reports of disappearances, shadowy manifestations, and obsession were recorded with meticulous detail, indicating a level of concern that suggests even rational observers could not dismiss the phenomena. Modern analysis recognizes that, regardless of mechanism, the mirror achieved something rare. It imposed a consistent and profound psychological and social influence across multiple witnesses, leaving a legacy that endures to this day. The mirror story has inspired books, documentaries, and research into the intersection of history, psychology, and the unexplained. It serves as a case study in how human perception can be manipulated, how fear can shape reality, and how objects of mystery can take on a life of their own. In revisiting Prague's historical files, researchers continue to grapple with the tension between fact and legend, seeking to understand whether the mirror's horrors were the product of human imagination, environmental factors, or an unknown force. The investigation itself, spanning centuries, reflects humanity's enduring fascination with the unknown and the lengths we go to seek understanding. Ultimately, the mirror that swallowed souls remains an enigma. Its legacy straddles the line between documented history and dark folklore, between psychological phenomenon and the unexplained. For modern audiences, it offers both a historical case study and a chilling narrative, a reminder that even ordinary objects, when imbued with mystery and fear, can become vessels of obsession, terror, and enduring fascination. The mirror continues to captivate researchers, storytellers, and the public, a symbol of the unknown, and a haunting testament to the dark interplay of curiosity, fear, and human perception. The mirror that swallowed souls in Prague remains, to this day, one of history's most compelling and unsettling enigmas. Though centuries have passed since the events of 1807, the object's story continues to haunt historians, psychologists, and paranormal researchers alike. It is a case that straddles the boundaries of reality and legend, fact and folklore, reason and fear, a mirror whose very existence challenges the limits of human understanding. The surviving testimonies, archival records, and classified documents collectively paint a picture of an artifact capable of shaping perception, influencing behavior, and leaving an indelible mark on both the mind and society. Looking back on the events, one of the most striking aspects is the mirror's ability to elicit obsession. From the first maid who succumbed to its psychological pull to scholars and priests who risked their sanity attempting to study it, the pattern is clear. The mirror demanded attention, and in doing so, exacted a toll. Its allure was irresistible, drawing in the curious, the skeptical, and the fearful alike. In many ways, the mirror functioned as a psychological amplifier, intensifying latent fears, anxieties, and desires, and transforming ordinary reflection into a profound, and often terrifying, experience. The historical context of 1807 Prague adds further depth to the narrative. A city steeped in superstition yet poised on the cusp of scientific inquiry provided fertile ground for both fear and fascination. Physicians struggled to explain the symptoms of victims, while scholars and occultists debated the mirror's origin and purpose. City officials, aware of the social consequences of rumor and panic, intervened through classified measures, demonstrating the mirror's impact not only on individuals but on institutions and governance. The interplay of cultural belief, scientific limitation, and bureaucratic concern underscores the mirror's significance as more than a household curiosity. It was a social phenomenon as well as a psychological and historical one. Modern analysis provides multiple lenses through which to interpret the mirror. Psychologists consider it an extreme case of suggestibility, mass hysteria, and obsession, highlighting the vulnerability of the human mind under intense focus and fear. Optical and auditory phenomena associated with mirrors, combined with environmental conditions and social reinforcement, offer plausible explanations for some of the reported experiences. Yet the consistency and intensity of the historical accounts, particularly the documented disappearances and persistent psychological trauma, leave room for speculation that something beyond conventional explanation may have occurred. The mirror continues to occupy a liminal space between science and the unexplained, between perception and reality. The mirror story also speaks to a broader human fascination with the unknown. Objects imbued with mystery, danger, or supernatural association have long captured imagination and inspired both fear and curiosity. The Prague mirror, with its reports of shadowy figures, whispers from within, and seemingly sentient responses to human attention, exemplifies the interplay between artifact and observer. It reminds us that human perception is not passive. It is shaped by expectation, belief, and context. In this sense, the mirror is both literal and symbolic, a reflection not only of the individual who gazed upon it but of society's collective anxieties and desires. Even after the mirror was removed from public view and classified files concealed its full details, its influence persisted through stories, rumors, and scholarly debate. The events of 1807 became woven into Prague's cultural memory, a tale of obsession, terror, and the fragile boundary between reality and myth. Writers, historians, and folklorists later recounted its story, ensuring that the mirror's legend would outlive its physical presence. Its narrative endures because it touches upon universal human fears: the fear of the unknown, the fear of losing control, and the fear that the very objects around us may harbor forces beyond comprehension. In reflecting upon the mirror's enduring mystery, we are reminded of the limits of human understanding. The events surrounding it challenge assumptions about reality, perception, and the material world. They force us to ask difficult questions. Can objects exert influence beyond the physical? How much of what we perceive is shaped by fear, expectation, and cultural conditioning? And what happens when curiosity, our most fundamental drive, intersects with forces we cannot fully comprehend? These questions remain unresolved, compelling successive generations to grapple with the mirror's legacy in new ways. Ultimately, the Prague mirror serves as both a historical case study and a cautionary tale. It illustrates the power of fascination and fear, the fragility of human perception, and the consequences of encountering forces that defy conventional explanation. Whether viewed through the lens of psychology, folklore, or the paranormal, the story resonates because it confronts fundamental aspects of human experience: curiosity, obsession, and the allure of the unknown. Its chilling narrative continues to captivate, provoke, and unsettle, inviting reflection on the delicate balance between knowledge and mystery. As we leave the story of 1807 behind, the mirror remains a symbol, a reminder of how objects can shape not only individual minds but collective consciousness. It is a story of obsession and terror, of authority and secrecy, and of human fascination with what lies just beyond understanding. The mirror that swallowed souls, classified and concealed yet forever remembered, endures as a dark reflection of both history and human nature, a haunting testament to the enduring power of mystery. The legacy of the mirror is not merely in the events it caused, but in the questions it continues to pose. What exactly occurred in that Prague manor? Were the disappearances and hallucinations the product of psychological stress, superstition, or something more? Modern researchers may never fully answer these questions, but the mirror's story persists as a compelling exploration of fear, obsession, and the enigmatic nature of reality itself. It reminds us that some mysteries are not meant to be solved entirely. They are meant to challenge, haunt, and provoke reflection long after the object itself has vanished from sight.